The invitation sat on Simone Kendra's desk, like a grenade with the pin pulled. Lotus Empire Annual Gala. Black tie. +1 optional. Her fingers trembled as she read the embossed gold lettering for the third time. 6 months of working as a junior analyst at Lotus Holdings, and she'd perfected the art of invisibility. Head down, work impeccable, presence minimal. That's how someone like her survived in a world that didn't make space for black women who couldn't afford designer everything. The CEO himself had hand-delivered it this morning. Lee Hyun-woo, the man whose name made Wall Street investors nervous and whose real business the FBI couldn't quite prove. He'd placed the heavy cardstock on her desk without a word, his dark eyes scanning her face for exactly 2 seconds before moving on to the next cubicle. She wasn't stupid. She knew what this was. He needed bodies to fill seats, employees who'd show up, smile appropriately, and fade into the expensive wallpaper. The gala was a performance, and she was being cast as an extra. Someone forgettable, someone safe. Simone looked down at her reflection in her darkened computer screen. Her natural hair was pulled into a sensible bun. Her blazer was 3 years old. Her skin, a rich mahogany brown, had never prompted a second glance in this office. Good, she'd always thought. Invisible means safe, but something hot and defiant flickered in her chest as she slipped the invitation into her bag. Maybe just this once she didn't want to be invisible. "Girl, you cannot be serious right now." Maya Johnson's voice crackled through Simone's phone speaker as Simone stood in front of her closet, staring at 3 years' worth of professional wardrobe choices. None of them screamed gala-worthy. Most of them whispered, "Please don't notice me." "It's just a work event," Simone said, though her hands were already pulling out her one good dress, a simple black number she'd worn to her college graduation. "I have to go. It's basically mandatory." "Mandatory?" Maya's laugh was sharp. "Simone, your boss is Lee Hyun-woo. That man doesn't do mandatory anything. If he invited you personally, there's a reason." Simone's stomach tightened. She'd been trying not to think about that. Lee Hyun-woo was a contradiction wrapped in a 3-piece suit. On paper, he was the 35-year-old CEO of Lotus Holdings, a real estate and investment empire that had consumed half of Manhattan's commercial district in 5 years. In whispered conversations at the office coffee machine, he was something else entirely. The young head of one of New York's most powerful Korean organized crime families, a man who commanded respect through fear and strategic brilliance. Simone had learned to keep her head down around him. During the handful of times he'd walked past her desk, she'd felt the air change. Everyone sat straighter, typed faster, breathed differently. Power radiated from him like heat from asphalt in July. "Maybe he just needs to fill seats," Simone said, putting the black dress back. "Too plain, too forgettable. I'm nobody, Maya. That's probably exactly why he invited me." Maya countered. "Maybe somebody finally noticed you're brilliant, gorgeous, and the hardest worker in that entire corrupt building." Simone closed her eyes. Maya had been her best friend since their freshman year at City College, back when they'd both believed hard work and intelligence could overcome any obstacle. Maya still believed it. Simone had learned to be more realistic. "I'll figure something out," Simone said softly. "I have to go. This job pays my rent." After she hung up, Simone stood in the silence of her small studio apartment. Through her window she could see the glittering skyline of Manhattan, so close, yet worlds away from her reality. She'd grown up in Brooklyn, raised by a grandmother who cleaned office buildings at night so Simone could have school supplies. She'd clawed her way through college on scholarships and 3 part-time jobs. Landing the position at Lotus Holdings had felt like finally breaking through. But 6 months in, she'd realized the truth. She was still invisible, still cleaning up other people's messes, just with a business degree instead of a mop. The gala was in 2 days. She had 48 hours to find something to wear and a lifetime to unlearn the instinct to disappear. The morning of the gala, Simone made a decision that surprised even herself. She called in sick to work and took the subway to a consignment boutique in Soho that Maya had been raving about for months. The owner, a fierce Latina woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, took one look at Simone and smiled. "You're here for armor, not a dress," she said. "Is there a difference?" Simone asked. "Tonight there is." 3 hours later, Simone walked out with a garment bag containing something that made her heart race with equal parts terror and excitement. She'd spent more than she should have, money earmarked for utilities, but as she'd stood in front of the boutique mirror, she'd seen something in her reflection she hadn't seen in years. Herself. The Lotus Empire Gala was held at the Azure, one of Manhattan's most exclusive venues. Simone arrived precisely at 8 p.m., her heart hammering against her ribs as she stepped out of a rideshare car that felt criminally out of place among the town cars and limousines. The dress she'd chosen was the color of burgundy wine, with a fitted silhouette that honored every curve of her 5'6" frame. The neckline was elegant but daring, the fabric catching light like liquid. She'd let her natural hair down for the first time in months, a crown of thick textured coils that framed her face and fell past her shoulders. Her makeup was subtle but striking, emphasizing the warm brown of her eyes and the fullness of her lips. Her grandmother's vintage gold earrings caught the light as she climbed the steps. She felt exposed, visible, terrified. Invisible means safe, a voice in her head whispered. But safe means invisible, another voice answered back. The moment Simone walked through the doors of the Azure, the universe shifted. It started with the doorman, whose professional mask slipped for just a second as his eyes widened. Then the coat check attendant, who fumbled with her ticket. By the time she entered the main ballroom, a sprawling space of crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, heads were turning, not just glancing, turning. Men and women alike paused mid-conversation to watch her move through the room. She felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, pressing against her skin. Her first instinct was to shrink, to find a corner, to become small again. But something stronger kept her spine straight and her chin up. She was done being invisible. Across the ballroom, standing in a circle of men in expensive suits, Lee Hyunwoo felt the shift before he saw the cause. Conversations were dying mid-sentence. His business associate, David Chen, had actually stopped talking, something that never happened. Even Han Woo-jin, his right hand and closest friend, had gone perfectly still beside him. "Boss," Woo-jin said quietly, his voice carrying a note of surprise. "You need to see this." Hyunwoo turned, irritation already forming. He had no patience for distractions tonight. The gala was business, a carefully orchestrated performance where deals were made and power was displayed. Every person in this room had been selected for their utility, their connections, their... His thoughts stopped. She moved through the crowd like she owned not just the room but the entire city beyond its windows. Her skin glowed like polished mahogany under the chandeliers. Her dress clung to curves that should be illegal, and her hair, God, her hair was a work of art, natural and unapologetic and absolutely stunning. But it was her face that made Hyunwoo's breath catch. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that held intelligence and something else. Defiance, maybe. Strength. She looked like she'd walked off a runway and decided the runway wasn't good enough. "Who is that?" David Chen breathed. Hyunwoo couldn't answer. His mind was racing, trying to place her. She looked familiar, but different, like seeing a stranger wearing someone else's face. Then she turned, scanning the room, and their eyes met across 50 feet of marble and champagne glasses. Recognition hit him like a punch to the chest. Simone Kendra, junior analyst. Third-floor cubicle by the northeast window. The woman he'd personally invited because she was quiet, efficient and, he'd assumed, utterly forgettable. Someone who'd fill a seat and fade into the background, exactly as he'd needed. She didn't look forgettable now. She looked like every man's fantasy and every woman's envy. She looked like someone who could command attention without saying a word. She looked dangerous. Their eyes held for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Hyunwoo watched something flicker across her face. Surprise, recognition, and then something that made his blood heat. Challenge. She didn't look away, didn't drop her gaze like everyone else in his life did. She looked at him like an equal. Then Jinna Park appeared at his elbow, her diamond jewelry catching light as she possessively touched his arm. "Hyunwoo, darling, I was just telling the Matsudas about your expansion in Tokyo." When he looked back, Simone had turned away, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter, but the heat in his chest didn't fade. Beside him, Wu Jin murmured. That's going to be a problem. Hyun Woo didn't answer. He was too busy watching Simone Kendra own a room full of Manhattan's elite without even trying, and wondering what the hell he'd just done by bringing her into his world. Simone had attended exactly 3 formal events in her entire life, and none of them had prepared her for this. The Azure Ballroom was a battlefield disguised as a party. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every smile had teeth behind it. The champagne was probably worth more than her monthly rent, and the people drinking it wielded the kind of power that could destroy lives with a phone call. She'd spent the first 20 minutes cataloguing exits and trying not to hyperventilate. But something strange was happening. People kept approaching her. First it was David Chen, one of the senior executives she'd seen in meetings but never actually spoken to. He'd introduced himself with genuine warmth, asked intelligent questions about her background, and acted like her answers actually mattered. Then came a couple who owned a chain of boutique hotels, who somehow knew she'd graduated with honors from City College. A tech entrepreneur who wanted her opinion on real estate trends in Brooklyn. A fashion designer who asked where she'd gotten her dress and seemed genuinely disappointed it was consignment. Within an hour, Simone had collected 4 business cards and 6 invitations to coffee. "You're the talk of the evening," a smooth voice said behind her. Simone turned to find an elegant woman in her 60s wearing a traditional Korean hanbok updated with modern tailoring. Her silver hair was swept into an intricate updo, and her dark eyes held the kind of intelligence that missed nothing. "Mrs. Lee," Simone said, recognition clicking. She'd seen photos of Lee Hyun-woo's mother in business magazines. "It's an honor." "The honor is mine," Mrs. Lee replied, studying Simone with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and evaluated. "You work for my son, I'm told." "Yes, ma'am. In the analytics department." Mrs. Lee's expression gave nothing away. "Does my son know what an asset he has hidden away in that department?" Before Simone could answer, the energy in the room shifted again. Conversations quieted. Bodies turned. Lee Hyun-woo was moving through the crowd. He wore a black tuxedo that looked like it had been tailored by angels and cost more than a car. His dark hair was styled perfectly, not a strand out of place. But it was the way he moved that captured attention. Predatory grace, absolute confidence, the kind of presence that made everyone else seem like background extras in his personal movie. Simone's mouth went dry. She'd seen him at the office, of course, but there he'd been contained, professional, distant, just another executive in a building full of them. Here, in his element, he was something else entirely. Power incarnate, beautiful and dangerous, like a blade catching light. The small tattoo of Korean characters on the left side of his neck, normally hidden by collar and tie, was partially visible now. The ink was delicate, almost elegant, a contrast to everything else about him that screamed danger. He stopped in front of his mother, his dark eyes sliding to Simone for half a second before focusing on Mrs. Lee. "Iyama," he said softly, his voice carrying that distinctive Korean-American blend, soul in his bones, New York in his consonants. "You're terrorizing my employees." "I'm educating myself," Mrs. Lee corrected. "This is Simone Kendra. She works for you, apparently, though I can't imagine why someone with her presence is buried in analytics." Simone felt her cheeks heat. "Mrs. Lee, She's very good at her job," Hyun-woo interrupted, and for the first time since arriving, Simone heard something in his voice she couldn't quite identify. Tension, maybe, or control slipping. The numbers don't analyze themselves. His eyes met hers fully now, and Simone felt the impact like a physical touch. Up close he was devastating. Sharp jawline, full lips, eyes so dark they were almost black. But it was the intensity in those eyes that made her breath catch. He was looking at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve, like she'd done something unexpected, and he hadn't decided yet whether to be impressed or irritated. "You look different," he said, and it wasn't quite a compliment, more like an accusation. "I'm not at my desk," Simone replied, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart was racing. Context changes everything. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Respect. Before she could identify it, a hand landed on his shoulder. "There you are!" Gina Park appeared like a designer-clad missile, her perfectly manicured fingers claiming Hyunwoo with possessive familiarity. She was beautiful in that pristine, manufactured way. Surgically enhanced features, designer everything, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never had a difficult day in her life. Her eyes landed on Simone and went cold. "I don't believe we've met," Jinna said, her smile sharp. "I'm Jinna Park, Hyunwoo's business associate," Hyunwoo interrupted smoothly, removing her hand from his shoulder with casual efficiency. "Miss Park handles our sole operations." Jinna's smile tightened. "We're very close, aren't we, darling?" The endearment hung in the air like a challenge. Simone watched Hyunwoo's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Miss Kendra," he said, ignoring Jinna entirely, "I need to introduce you to some people. You're being wasted in analytics." Before Simone could process what was happening, his hand was on the small of her back, warm through the fabric of her dress, guiding her away from his mother and Jinna's narrowing eyes. "You didn't have to do that," Simone said quietly as they moved through the crowd. "I'm fine with analytics." "You're not fine with anything," Hyunwoo replied, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're brilliant, and you're hiding. I looked at your work after tonight's invitation. The predictive models you built last month saved us $2 million in avoided investments. Your risk assessments are better than people with 10 times your experience." Simone stopped walking, forcing him to stop too. Around them the party continued, but in their small bubble of space, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Why did you invite me?" she asked. The question had been burning in her chest all night. The real reason? Hyunwoo's expression was unreadable. "I needed someone competent who wouldn't make waves, someone professional who'd be presentable but forgettable." The words should have hurt, but Simone found herself smiling instead. A small knowing smile that made his eyes narrow. "How's that working out for you?" she asked. For a long moment he just looked at her. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Terribly. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. They were still standing too close, his hand still on her back, when Victor Castellano appeared. Simone recognized him from news reports. The head of a rival organization, Italian-American with connections to legitimate business and illegitimate everything else. He was 60, silver-haired, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Lee," Castellano said smoothly. "Wonderful party. And who is this stunning creature?" Hyunwoo's hand on Simone's back tightened, just slightly, but she felt it, felt the tension radiating through his perfectly controlled exterior. "Simone Kendra," Hyunwoo said, his voice dropping 10 degrees. "She's with me." The words were simple, but the meaning underneath them was crystal clear. "Off limits. Mine. Don't even think about it." Castellano's smile widened. "Of course. Just admiring your excellent taste, as always." His eyes traveled over Simone in a way that made her skin crawl. "If you ever get tired of working for Lee, Miss Kendra, I always have positions available for talented individuals. I'm very happy where I am," Simone said firmly. "For now," Castellano replied and walked away. The moment he was gone, Simone felt Hyunwoo's entire body coil with barely contained violence. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hand on her back had become possessive, protective, pulling her infinitesimally closer. "I need to get you away from here," he said, his voice rough. "Why?" He looked down at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Heat. Possession. Something dark and dangerous and entirely focused on her. "Because every man in this room is looking at you like you're something they can take," he said quietly. "And I'm about to start breaking jaws." Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. "You invited me here." "Biggest mistake of my life," Hyunwoo said, but his hand didn't leave her back. "Come on, there's someone I actually want you to meet." As he guided her toward the terrace doors, Simone caught Jinna Park's venomous glare from across the room. She had a feeling her invisible days were officially over. The terrace was a sanctuary from the performance inside. Manhattan sprawled below them, a galaxy of lights against velvet darkness. The autumn air was cool against Simone's bare shoulders, raising goosebumps she tried to ignore. Music from the ballroom filtered through the glass doors, muted and distant. Han Woo-jin was waiting by the railing, a champagne flute in his hand he clearly had no intention of drinking. He was younger than Hyunwoo, maybe 30, with sharp features and eyes that catalogued everything. He wore his tuxedo like armor, and Simone recognized him instantly as the man who'd been at Hyunwoo's side all evening. "Woo Jin," Hyunwoo said, "this is Simone Kendra." Woo Jin studied her for 3 long seconds, then smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "The woman who's causing my boss to forget how to think. I've heard about you." "You have?" Simone glanced at Hyunwoo, who'd moved to the railing, his hands in his pockets, his profile sharp against the city lights. "Your predictive model last month," Woo Jin explained. "It identified a pattern in real estate acquisitions that no one else saw. Saved us from investing in properties that got raided by the FBI 3 weeks later." He raised his glass in salute. "That's either brilliance or instinct. Maybe both." Simone felt heat creep up her neck. "I just follow the numbers. They tell stories if you know how to listen." "Most people don't know how to listen," Hyunwoo said without turning around. His voice carried that same tension from inside, wound tight and barely controlled. "They see what they want to see. You see what's actually there." There was something in his tone. Appreciation, yes, but also frustration. Like her competence was simultaneously impressive and inconvenient. "Why am I really here?" Simone asked, directing the question to Hyunwoo's back. "And don't tell me it's about filling seats. You could have invited anyone." For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. Raw, unguarded. This wasn't the CEO or the crime lord. This was just a man, and he looked exhausted. "Because you're the only person in that entire building who doesn't want anything from me," he said quietly. "You do your work, collect your paycheck, and go home. You don't scheme. You don't gossip. You don't try to get close to me for connections or favors or whatever the hell everyone else wants. So I'm safe," Simone said, understanding clicking. "Boring. Forgettable." "You were supposed to be," Hyunwoo replied, his eyes holding hers. "But you walked into that ballroom looking like every fantasy I didn't know I had, and now every shark in that room is circling. Castellano's already planning how to poach you. Jinnar's plotting how to destroy you. And I—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "You what?" Simone prompted. "I'm realizing I made a mistake," he finished. "I should have left you invisible." The words should have stung, but Simone heard what he wasn't saying. The tension in his shoulders, the way his hands had curled into fists, the possessive fury in his eyes when Castellano had looked at her. "I have to go," she said suddenly, needing distance, needing to think. "This was a mistake. I'll submit my resignation on Monday." "No." The word was sharp, absolute. Hyunwoo closed the distance between them in 3 strides, and suddenly he was too close, invading her space, his presence overwhelming. "You're not quitting. You're not running. You're not going anywhere. You just said—" "I said I made a mistake inviting you," he interrupted. "Not having you, there's a difference." Simone's heart was racing so fast, she felt dizzy. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His hand came up, fingertips brushing her cheek so gently, it felt like a question. "I know you graduated top of your class while working 3 jobs. I know your grandmother raised you in Brooklyn. I know you take the subway an extra 40 minutes out of your way every Tuesday to volunteer at a community center in your old neighborhood. I know you eat lunch at your desk, and you never, ever ask for help, even when you need it." Simone stepped back, shock making her clumsy. "How do you—" "I run a background check on every employee," he said simply. "But yours, I actually read. 3 times. Because the numbers didn't make sense. Someone that smart, that dedicated, should have been running her own company by now. Instead, you're hiding in a cubicle, making yourself small. That's survival," Simone said, her voice shaking. "That's what people like me have to do in worlds like this." "Not anymore." His eyes were fierce. "Not in my world." "Your world?" Simone laughed, but it came out brittle. "Your world is built on things I don't want to know about. I'm an analyst, Mr. Lee. I work with numbers, not—" She gestured vaguely at the city. "Whatever empire you're actually running." "Hyunwoo," he corrected. "And you're right. My world is dangerous. It's dark. It's not somewhere someone like you should be." "Then why are we having this conversation?" He looked at her like she'd asked why the sun rises. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." Because for 6 months, you've been 20 feet from my office, and I never looked twice. And then you walked in tonight and I couldn't look away. His voice dropped. Because you're making me want things I gave up on years ago. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Before Simone could respond, Wu Jin cleared his throat. Boss, we have a problem. The moment shattered. Hyun Woo's expression shuttered, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the crime lord's mask. What kind of problem? Detective Cruz is here. He's asking questions about the Castellano situation. Hyun Woo's jaw tightened. Shit. Who's Detective Cruz? Simone asked. Someone who's been trying to prove I'm more than a real estate investor for 3 years, Hyun Woo said. He looked at Wu Jin. Stall him. I need 5 minutes. Wu Jin nodded and disappeared back into the ballroom. Hyun Woo turned to Simone, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something that looked like fear. Not for himself, for her. Listen to me carefully, he said, his hands framing her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. When you go back inside, you're going to pretend this conversation never happened. You're going to smile, make small talk, and leave in exactly 30 minutes. Take a car service. Here's a card for the company we use. He pressed a black business card into her hand. They'll get you home safely. I don't understand. You don't need to understand, he interrupted. You need to trust me. Can you do that? Simone should have said no. Should have walked away from this man and his dangerous world and his impossible confessions. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that called to a part of her she'd been suppressing for years. Someone who saw her, really saw her. Not as invisible, not as forgettable, but as someone worth protecting, worth risking things for. 30 minutes, she agreed. Relief flooded his expression. Good. Wu Jin will be watching. If anyone bothers you, find him. And what about you? His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and the gentleness of the gesture contradicted everything she knew about him. I'll be dealing with problems, like I always do. He stepped back, and the loss of his warmth felt like abandonment. But before he could turn away, Simone grabbed his wrist. Hyun Woo, she said, using his first name for the first time. Whatever you're involved in, I don't want to be a liability. I don't want to be someone you have to protect because I'm weak or naive. His smile was sad. You could never be a liability. That's what scares me. He pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache, and then he was gone, disappearing back into the ballroom with the controlled grace of a predator returning to the hunt. Simone stood alone on the terrace, her hand pressed to where he'd kissed her, her heart racing with fear and excitement, and something that felt dangerously like hope. 30 minutes, she'd promised. She had a feeling 30 minutes might change everything. Simone made it exactly 12 minutes before everything went to hell. She'd been nursing a champagne flute she had no intention of drinking, making polite conversation with a tech investor who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts on gentrification's economic impact, when the energy in the room shifted violently. It started with Wu Jin moving fast, too fast for someone at a formal party. His hand went to his ear, pressing an invisible earpiece, his expression darkening. Then security personnel who'd been invisible suddenly weren't, their postures changing from decorative to defensive. Something was very wrong. Simone's instinct screamed at her to leave. Instead, she found herself scanning the room for Hyun Woo. She spotted him near the entrance, deep in conversation with Detective Cruz, a sharp-featured Latino man in his 40s, wearing an off-the-rack suit that screamed law enforcement. Their body language was hostile. Professional, but hostile. Then Jinnah appeared at Simone's elbow, her smile poisonous. Enjoying yourself? Jinnah asked, her tone suggesting she hoped the answer was no. I have to say, you've made quite the impression tonight. Hyun Woo barely looked at anyone else. I'm just here for work, Simone replied carefully. Of course you are. Jinnah's laugh was acid. Just like I'm here for the champagne. We both know that's a lie, darling. The question is, do you actually think you have a chance with him? Simone should have walked away, should have followed Hyun Woo's instructions to stay invisible. But something in Jinnah's tone, the dismissive certainty, the casual cruelty, ignited the part of her that had survived Brooklyn, that had fought for every scholarship, every opportunity, every moment of recognition in a world designed to overlook her. I think, Simone said quietly, that's between me and him. Jina's expression went nuclear. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Hyunwoo's world isn't some romance novel. It's blood and business and tradition. Girls like you. Her eyes traveled over Simone with contempt. You're a curiosity, a momentary distraction. He'll get bored and you'll be back in your cubicle pretending this never happened. And girls like you? Simone asked, surprised by her own boldness. What are you to him? I'm family, Jina hissed. I'm his world. I understand where he comes from, what he needs, what he— An explosion of sound cut her off. Not an actual explosion, but close. Raised voices, scuffling. The unmistakable crack of fist meeting flesh. The crowd near the entrance scattered, revealing a scene that made Simone's blood run cold. 3 men she didn't recognize, clearly not guests, were forcing their way past security. One of them had a gun visible beneath his jacket. Woo Jin was already moving, and she watched him disarm one attacker with brutal efficiency that confirmed every suspicion she'd had about what Hyunwoo's organization actually did. But it was Hyunwoo who captured her attention. He moved like violence was a language he spoke fluently. One of the attackers lunged at him, and Hyunwoo sidestepped with predatory grace, his fist connecting with the man's jaw hard enough that Simone heard bone crack from 30 feet away. The man dropped. The elegant CEO had vanished. In his place was something else entirely. A fighter, a leader, someone who'd grown up knowing that power was taken, not given. Detective Cruz was shouting into his phone, calling for backup, and in the chaos, Simone saw it. The third attacker wasn't focused on Hyunwoo or security. He was scanning the crowd, and when his eyes landed on Simone, recognition flickered across his face. He started moving toward her with purpose. They know who I am, she realized with cold clarity. They know I'm important to him. Fear paralyzed her for exactly 2 seconds. Then her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. When the world comes at you, baby, you don't freeze. You move. Simone moved. She grabbed Jina, who'd gone pale with shock, and pulled her toward the terrace doors. Get out of here, now! To her credit, Jina didn't argue. She ran, but the attacker was faster. He caught Simone's wrist in a grip that would leave bruises, spinning her around. Up close, she could see the desperation in his eyes, the amateur fear of someone who'd been sent to do a job he wasn't qualified for. You're coming with me, he said in accented English. Italian, maybe, one of Castellano's people. Boss wants to have a conversation with Lee. You're the leverage. Simone's mind raced. She'd grown up in Brooklyn. She'd survived street harassment, attempted muggings, and once a man who'd followed her for 6 blocks. She'd learned young that freezing got you hurt. Fighting smart kept you alive. Okay, she said, letting her body go compliant. Okay, don't hurt me. The attacker's grip loosened fractionally. Simone drove her heel down on his instep with every ounce of strength she had. He howled, releasing her, and she grabbed the champagne bottle from a nearby table and swung it into his temple. The bottle didn't break. Hollywood had lied about that, but it connected hard enough that he staggered, and then Hyunwoo was there. He moved like death itself, grabbing the attacker by the throat and slamming him against a marble column with enough force to crack stone. The man's feet left the ground. You touched her, Hyunwoo said, his voice so cold it burned. You put your hands on her. Boss! Woo Jin appeared, trying to intervene. Cruz is still here. We can't— I don't care. Hyunwoo's hand tightened on the man's throat. The delicate tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with rage. He touched her. Simone watched the man's face turn purple and realized with shock that Hyunwoo was going to kill him. Right here, in front of witnesses, in front of a detective, in front of Manhattan's elite. He was going to commit murder because someone had grabbed her wrist. Hyunwoo, her voice cut through his rage. Stop! He didn't respond, didn't even look at her. Hyunwoo! She grabbed his arm, the one holding the attacker, and felt the coiled violence in his muscles. Please, I'm okay, I'm fine. Let him go. Finally his eyes shifted to her. What she saw there made her breath catch. Raw, unfiltered emotion, fear and fury, and something that looked heartbreakingly like anguish. He touched you, Hyunwoo repeated, but his voice cracked on the last word. And I handled it, Simone said firmly, because I'm not helpless, because I'm not something fragile you need to destroy people over. She held his gaze. Let him go. For me. For 3 seconds, that felt like hours. Hyun-woo didn't move. Then, slowly, his hand opened. The attacker collapsed, gasping. Security hauled the man away as Detective Cruz pushed through the crowd, his expression a mixture of frustration and triumph. Lee, Cruz said, we need to talk, now. But Hyun-woo was only looking at Simone. His hands came up to frame her face, checking for injuries with a gentleness that contradicted the violence of seconds ago. Did he hurt you? His voice was rough, desperate. Tell me the truth. I'm fine, Simone said. I promise. You hit him with a bottle. Something that might have been pride flickered through the fear. You defended yourself. Brooklyn girl, Simone said, trying to smile. We don't freeze. Hyun-woo pulled her against his chest in an embrace that had nothing to do with romance, and everything to do with relief. She felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt his hands shaking as they held her. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so fucking sorry. This is my fault. I never should have brought you here. Lee, Cruz's voice was sharp. Now. Hyun-woo pulled back, his expression hardening as reality reasserted itself. He looked at Woo Jin. Get her out of here. Take her home, stay with her until I send someone I trust. Hyun-woo, Simone started. Please. His thumb brushed her cheek, and his eyes held hers with desperate intensity. Please just go. Let me fix this. Detective Cruz was approaching, flanked by uniformed officers. Woo Jin took Simone's arm gently. Come on. We need to leave now. Simone let herself be led away, but she looked back once. Hyun-woo was standing in the center of chaos, his tuxedo disheveled, his carefully constructed image shattered, watching her with an expression that broke her heart. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd fallen in love with the one person he should have kept at a distance, and Simone realized with terrifying clarity that she'd already fallen too. Simone didn't sleep. Woo Jin had driven her home in a town car that probably cost more than her entire apartment building, checked every room of her studio for threats, and positioned himself outside her door like a well-dressed sentinel. She'd assured him she was fine. She'd changed into pajamas. She'd even tried lying down. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Hyun-woo's hand around that man's throat, saw the barely controlled violence, saw the fear in his eyes when he'd looked at her. He would have killed for me, she realized, without hesitation, without regret. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her understand something she'd been avoiding for months. She'd fallen for a dangerous man in a dangerous world, and there was no going back to invisible. Her phone buzzed at 4:47 a.m. Unknown number. It's me. Are you awake? Simone's heart stuttered. She knew who me was. Simone. Yes. Unknown. I'm outside. Can I come up? She should have said no. Should have put distance between herself and whatever this was becoming. Instead, she texted back, 3rd floor, 3C. 2 minutes later, a soft knock. Simone opened the door to find Hyun-woo looking nothing like the polished CEO or the violent protector. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, collar open, revealing more of the Korean characters tattooed on his neck. She could now see they formed a vertical column of delicate script. His hair was disheveled. His eyes were haunted. He looked human, vulnerable, lost. Can I come in? He asked quietly. Simone stepped aside. Her studio apartment was embarrassingly small, a converted one-bedroom in Brooklyn that she could barely afford. One room serving as bedroom, living room, and office. A kitchenette tucked into a corner. Second-hand furniture and plants she'd rescued from the clearance rack at the bodega. It was the opposite of everything in Hyun-woo's world. I'm sorry, he said, standing awkwardly in her small space like he didn't know what to do with his hands. I shouldn't have come. I needed to see you, to make sure you were really okay. I'm okay, Simone said. What happened after I left? Cruz questioned me for 3 hours. Woo Jin handled the cleanup. The attackers were Castellano's people. Low-level, desperate, stupid. His jaw clenched. They're in custody. He won't try that again. Because you'll retaliate. Because he knows I'll burn his entire empire to the ground if he comes near you again. Hyun-woo's eyes met hers, fierce and uncompromising. I made that very clear. Simone crossed her arms, suddenly cold, despite her apartment's stifling heat. This is insane. Yesterday I was nobody. Today I'm leverage in some crime war I don't understand. You were never nobody, Hyunwoo said roughly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You were always someone. I just didn't let myself see it. Why not? Because... He stopped, struggling. Because my world doesn't have space for people I care about. Everyone I've ever loved has either betrayed me, left me, or become a target. My father was killed by a rival when I was 19. My brother chose to disappear rather than inherit this life. My mother... His voice cracked. My mother stays in this world because she has no choice, because family honor demands it. But I see what it costs her every day. Simone's heart ached. So you kept me at a distance. I kept everyone at a distance, he corrected. Gina thinks we have something. We don't. We never did. She's useful because she understands the world I live in, because she wants power more than connection. But you... He took a step closer. You're everything I can't have. Everything I shouldn't want. Everything that makes me wish I could be someone different. I don't want you to be different, Simone said, the truth surprising her even as she spoke it. I saw what you did tonight. I saw the violence, the control, the darkness, and it should terrify me. She moved closer to him. But all I could think was, he did that for me. He lost control for me. He would have killed for me. I would, Hyunwoo said simply, without hesitation. I know. Simone reached up, her hand touching his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. That's what makes this so dangerous, because I think I'd do the same for you. His hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek like it was something precious. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Maybe, Simone agreed, but I spent my whole life being what people expected. Being small, being invisible, being safe. And tonight, for the first time, I felt seen, really seen, by the most dangerous man in the room. She smiled sadly. I think I'm done being invisible. It's not safe. Nothing about you is safe, Simone interrupted. But maybe I don't want safe anymore. Maybe I want real. Hyunwoo looked at her like she'd offered him salvation and damnation in the same breath. Then, slowly, carefully, he pulled her against him. Not with passion or heat, but with desperate relief, like she was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop shifting. I don't know how to do this, he confessed into her hair. I don't know how to have something good without destroying it. Then we'll figure it out together, Simone said. But you have to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. If I'm in this world with you, I need to know what I'm dealing with. I need truth, not protection. Hyunwoo pulled back to look at her, something like awe in his expression. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm a Brooklyn girl who's tired of being underestimated, Simone corrected. There's a difference. This time, when he smiled, it was genuine. The first real smile she'd ever seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. My name is Lee Hyunwoo, he said formally, like they were meeting for the first time. I'm the head of a Korean-American crime organization that my grandfather founded 60 years ago. We deal in real estate, investments, and things I'm not proud of but won't apologize for. I have enemies, responsibilities, and a life expectancy that probably ends violently. He took her hand. And I think I'm falling in love with my junior analyst who hit a made man with a champagne bottle and somehow made me believe in second chances. Simone's eyes burned with unexpected tears. My name is Simone Kendra. I'm a data analyst from Brooklyn who's brilliant at reading patterns and terrible at following safe advice. I have student loans, a rescue plant addiction, and a grandmother who taught me that being underestimated is its own kind of power. She squeezed his hand. And I think I'm falling for a crime lord who looked at me like I was worth burning the world for. Not the world, Hyunwoo corrected, pulling her close again. Just everyone in it. This time, when he kissed her, it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming and desperate and full of promises they'd have to figure out how to keep. Simone kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body pressed against his like she could anchor them both to this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the sky outside her window was starting to lighten with dawn. I have to go, Hyunwoo said reluctantly. Crews will be watching me. I need to handle the Castellano situation before it escalates. Will you be safe? The question felt inadequate for what she was actually asking. Will you come back? He seemed to understand. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. I've survived 35 years in this world by being smart and ruthless, but now I have something I never had before. What's that? A reason to be careful, he said simply. You. After he left, Simone stood at her window, watching the city wake up. Her phone buzzed. Hyunwoo. Thank you, Simone. For what? Hyunwoo. For seeing me. For not running. For hitting that asshole with a bottle. Simone. Brooklyn girls don't run. We fight. Hyunwoo. That's what I'm counting on. Simone smiled, her reflection in the window showing a woman who looked nothing like the invisible analyst from yesterday. She looked powerful, seen, alive. Her phone buzzed again. Maya. Girl, I'm seeing news reports about a fight at some gala. Are you okay? Simone. I'm perfect. And Maya? I think I just changed my entire life. Maya. Call me right now. Simone laughed and pressed dial. She had a feeling this was going to be a very long conversation. But for the first time in years, she didn't mind. Being invisible had been safe. Being seen was going to be extraordinary. 6 months later, Simone Kendra stood in the executive suite on the 42nd floor of Lotus Holdings, looking out at Manhattan spread below her like a promise. The office was hers now. Director of Strategic Analysis. A title that came with respect, resources, and a salary that had made her grandmother cry with joy. She'd earned it. Every grueling presentation, every late-night analysis session, every meeting where she'd proven her worth beyond question. But the best part? She'd done it with her eyes wide open. She knew exactly what Lotus Holdings was, knew about the money laundering fronts, the protection networks, the delicate balance Hyunwoo maintained between legitimate business and organized crime. She'd chosen to stay anyway, chosen to use her skills to help him build something that could eventually transition fully legitimate. It was a long game, maybe impossible. But for the first time in her life, Simone believed in impossible things. Working late again, Hyunwoo's voice came from the doorway. She turned to find him leaning against the frame, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it. A habit she'd learned meant he was stressed. Castellano meeting ran long, she asked. Detective Cruz crashed it, Hyunwoo said, walking over to wrap his arms around her from behind. He's like a particularly annoying mosquito. Can't seem to kill him. Can't ignore him. Simone laughed, leaning back against his chest. 6 months, and her heart still raced when he touched her. 6 months, and she still couldn't quite believe this was her life. Your mother invited me to dinner on Sunday, she mentioned. I know. She likes you better than she likes me. His lips brushed her temple. She says you're good for my soul, whatever that means. It means I make you smile, Simone said, turning in his arms. Something you apparently didn't do enough before. I had nothing to smile about before, Hyunwoo said simply. Then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of a future they were building together, one dangerous, impossible day at a time. Outside the windows, the city glittered. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other against every odd held on tight. Being invisible had been survival. Being seen, being loved, being chosen, that was living.